This is Dan Housman from Graticule here on the Novel Cohorts podcast. I'm here with Julie Krommenhoek from IBM Watson Health. I'm really excited about talking to her today because we're announcing a partnership between Graticule and Watson Health, and we're here to talk about the kind of things we can do together in rare diseases. So Julie, welcome. And maybe, just to kick things off, give us a quick overview of what you're doing at Watson Health and what you're excited about in rare disease.
Sure, Dan. Yeah, thanks for having me. So Julie Krommenhoek, I'm with Watson Health. I lead global sales, and background has a long history in real-world data. So today, this is a really exciting partnership because we're talking about some areas where near and dear to my heart is working on not only the rare diseases and how we tie that into clinical trials, but most of my life was spent in researching in clinical trials and then turning around and going to market with those. So today we're going to talk about how we can take all the mysteries out of some of the patient identification issues that are existing and how we're going to link the data, extend the data, and most importantly, turn this into allowing researchers to be better decision makers. And really, as a researcher at Trade, that's really what I set foot doing years ago in rare diseases. And this way, we are actually extending this well past just where we were before, which is trying to find data that's deep and meaningful, to now really mapping this to the patient journey. And then with Graticule's help, we're able to make better decision making because we actually have the help that completes that journey and really answers the questions that all of us as researchers have been looking for years. So I'll kick it off with that, Dan.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I'd say, we work directly with life sciences customers in their rare disease groups, and they've been giving us all sorts of input into what are the hard things for them. I'd say among the big hard problems we're trying to solve with partnering with Watson Health is this patient identification problem. And maybe I'll give the problem real quick and we can talk together about some of the solutions, which is, if a patient does have a rare disease, they become a bit of a needle in a haystack, especially if they have a long process before they get diagnosed. Because a lot of these rare diseases look just like a common disease. And the people they're going to see to get treated treat common diseases. So they get a diagnosis of a bad back when they have some kind of autoimmune disease, or they get a diagnosis of, a problem with their wrist when they have something that will eventually affect their heart. And it's just really hard to come up with systems that can find those patients efficiently, because if we can't run a clinical trial, or at least it becomes prohibitively expensive and slow. If we can't find the patients after drugs in the market, which means we have something that could help a group of people, but for the fact we don't know who they are. And so maybe we can talk a little bit, Julie, about areas where you see it's exciting for us to work together to start building the solutions where we can take the Watson Health data and services to build out solutions on this patient identification space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you describe the fact that we have all these, and I know what you call and what we in the industry say is the data to study gap. And what we're seeing is that a couple major things are happening. When I was doing rare disease back in neuropathic pain, and we were talking about complex regional pain syndrome, we were doing these small groups, of studies, and it was all leading to neuropathic pain. And we did have, typical, first responders were saying, they were having neuropathic type of ailments, and we were mapping those ailments, but they were just in one slice of data. And what you're describing is that if we take those data slices, that doesn't always meet all the radars for large pharma, because it's more of your small size trials for rare diseases that are spurring the discovery. And what I'm hearing us do today, which is completely different, and thanks to the FDA also accepting real world evidence now to support drug approvals in the setting of oncology and rare diseases, that's a major breakthrough. And we're seeing that. COVID or not, we're really making some really great entry points into those small size trials that you're talking about. So Dan, I think one area that we really, the audience would need to hear about is how we, as a partnership between Watson Health and Graticule, are really solving some of those key crises between that data to study gap to solve some of the rare diseases and those research challenges, because they are small. and what we need to help with the future. And then we'll get into kind of the payer side and what we can do to help out on that. But let's start with the,
Yeah, I mean, I'd
yeah,
say one of the things that is fantastic about Watson Health is the market scan data set, which is pretty much the gold standard that health economists have been using for forever. And what it lacks often in rare disease is a couple things. One, there are certain extended data sets that would be really, really helpful beyond claims data. And sometimes we can expand out of market scan into Explorus to get to the EHR data. But in working together, we have a nice partnership to enable a couple things to extend beyond those two data sets. One, if we build a model, something that can predict someone might have rare disease, if we were to do a definitive test like a biopsy or a blood test, we can push those models into health systems that Graticule is working with and work like a CRO to then bring it closer to the point of care, which is really why they're building out these patient identification solutions. They're most useful when they're at the point of care. And so we're really enjoying the capacity to be able to take a big enough data set and a rich enough data set to see where the gaps are and then move it forwards through into the health system environments. And the other thing is we can start to link this data with other useful scale data sets that are outside of Explorus. And there'll be more announcements to come, but there's already a rich set of partnerships that, given that we have a lot of expertise in what the problem is, we can already leverage within the Watson Health ecosystem to bring extended data in. So Watson Health has linkage to lab data that can be brought in. We can bring in extended data in radiology and pathology. And these are areas I think no one's thought to really pursue until now. And so we're able to invent these new capabilities off of linked data as well as extending data that the customers we're talking to in rare disease companies are getting really excited about.
well, not only excited, Dan, you're really answering what the synthetic control arm is bringing to market. We in the industry have always, we didn't maybe title it as a synthetic control arm or an external control arm, but we know that there are areas, especially within rare diseases, where it's just not prudent or ethical to have a full trial, or nor is there some, there's the expense and the cost behind that. So replacing this with, from having actual patients and using real world data to our advantage by the multi-source. And I think what you really raised was the key contributor to this is having a diverse data set. And whether it's imaging, whether it's being able to mark where that disease is going and use those deep data sets by having a diversity is really where the future is in research. And we know that the payers in the marketplace that are listening are seeing a future that's going to increase. So they have to really start looking at, as spend increases, health economic evidence increases, which is going to play a greater role in our partnership, because then that product evaluation process really that lands in rare diseases and the orphan drug market requires us all to get really good evidence with the synthetic external control arms and start bringing that to market in a really new way. And I know you've mentioned with burden of illness studies and things like that you've been personally working on. This really does drive down the cost, and it helps with those treatment options so that pharma can actively manage new and many orphan disease types. So I really think this is a really innovative way to think about their new therapies as well.
And it's a good point, which is that for the drug companies out there that are looking to bring a new product to launch, their drug works, but it's probably going to have a very high price point because these would be for small populations. And they need help from the Watson Health data, the right health economics arguments, but also a very rich approach and an open approach to how do we define burden of disease. So on the one hand, we have the strong traditional information that comes on healthcare utilization that comes out of things like market scan. On the other hand, we want to know, what is the patient's quality of life? Where are their impairments? We can look inside of some of the data sets like HPM, which is an absenteeism, presenteeism benefits data set within the Watson Health family that can give us this extended information about quality of life. Or we can link in data that comes from outside sources that can tell us about their quality of life. And I think that's going to help these groups that are trying to make their dossiers for payers and their launch strategies and their communications off to providers to communicate effectively because they have enough information on the patients that are in small groups that they want to treat.
Exactly. And then we're also taking that quality of life measurement, and we are creating our own. I mean, inside Watson Health and Watson Health research, we are creating new historic landmarks in how we are like really bringing a sophisticated group to explain those quality of life measures. And then we're showing that it can be available to all, all rare diseases, because we can use this in so many different efforts that are being taken. Because we know that we've already raised the awareness of what needs to be done. With Graticule's help, we're also implementing, and then we're also looking into some genetic testing, genetic diagnostic tests that are being used for rare and ultra rare diseases. And I know that you really do focus on, a few rare diseases, but it spans beyond that. But there's really a correlation that I see growing between that quality of life and also the correlation with other types of clinical data that you've experimented with on identifying new target biomarkers and testing new panels for rare diseases.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously we're not going to make a ton of product roadmap commitments today.
Right.
Among the many things we do hear from the rare disease companies is that if we can merge and match genetic testing data, which is now going on at enough scale to be beneficial to identifying rare disease patients, being able to identify, so here's one of the problems, okay? If you have a rare disease, it doesn't have an ICD-10 code. What you will find is you're in some big broad category, and there's 12 different mutations, each of which are a different disease potentially, because only some can be treated with a certain drug. And because it doesn't have an ICD-10 code, it's stuck in the market. But by bringing, say, the whole market scan data set or another data set into the play with the definitive diagnosis that comes from genetic tests, which are now being done at scale from a small number of providers, we really can help a group to get to that critical mass to say, I can look at the 1,000 patients who have this disease that are in this data set and know exactly which version of the disease they have to be able to understand their drug and understand what the impact will be of treating it. I think the higher level point of looking into this is we're hearing from customers the data they need, and we're trying to be as responsive as possible to figuring out how to get it done. And it's just great to be working with your team at Watson Health, because you're not opposed to the innovation and the creativity. You're trying to do this smarter health approach, and it's going to work because we're willing to battle the unsolved problems and get to what people need.
Well, what you're getting to, here's what I hear you saying, is getting to our overall tagline, which is smarter health. And that's what Watson Health stands for, is enabling partnerships like you to be able to really, I don't really love the word reuse or repurpose, but that's what we're doing. We're scaling this properly so that the clients that you're speaking with join our fight, which is the sellers that I have on my team are answering those key challenges from our key clients. And they're identifying what insights and how to have faster breakthroughs and how to improve the experiences that people are having once they receive that medicine. And so really what I also really enjoy about this partnership is the ability to repurpose and use this approach and technology to grow our relationships. We already have deep relationships in pharma and CRO market and health systems and also providers. So what we're able to do is really bring all this together so we can deploy the right solutions, and we're leveraging at the right time. And what you're helping us do is really identify how those rare diseases in the broader populations that are, they're called rare, but we can make them more common in terms of an approach to solve. And we're okay with bringing in some of those extreme cases, because I think some of the smaller biotechs, Dan, you and I have talked about this, they don't get noticed. Like earlier in the call, we have to be able to make it easier for not only the drug approval, but also to get to the area where we can actually see those rare diseases take on and get to launch and get to be a part of the life cycle, so it becomes a bigger marketplace.
Yeah, and it's a great point as well that rare disease is a strategy for a pharma often to get into a broader disease category.
That's exactly it.
So if you want to figure out who's going to respond to a drug, you look for the people with the most extreme phenotype. And so maybe there's only 1,000 of those people, but your drug's going to, ideally, if it's a good drug, will work very well in that population. And by working with your team and the data and services we can get from Watson Health, that there's a pathway that we can offer to these groups that are, fighting through their first indication, whether it's a, small biotech or it's a large biotech with a rare disease strategy, but have the data to provide that pathway into more common disease. So if someone's treating, I don't know, prurigo nodularis, it's an extremely rare, extremely strong itch disease, and we can identify all the things we need to get that drug into market. Itch is a huge, broad market, right? There's, dermatitis, there's atopic dermatitis, and you can walk across those various levels over the period of 5 or 6 years, and we can give them the planks as they're walking to find their route with the data and services we're putting together. But it starts in a lot of these cases, and I think it's going to continue to start in these cases with rare disease real world evidence, which is why we're so excited about focusing in this one seemingly narrow space.
Well, and I think so. We've covered the data to study gap, because I know that is one of our big callings that we really ask for to help create a market and really, have a channel expansion in that area. What I hear back, in case you don't hear it all the time, Dan, is what we hear from working with the team at Graticule is the partnership is also additive to the other businesses that we have. So you're able to really pull in multiple different areas throughout our company to be able to find these, go deeper with the niche areas, but also the intent is to create a faster and scalable option for customers, for all of our customers. And I know that the sellers are saying that the pharma companies are responding. They're also saying the CRO is responding. So what I really like is that this is really all encompassing. We're able to meet the client where they're at, start with the population that they're dealing with, and then also bring it through this patient journey, help them with the patient identification, and really bring it all the way through, which is helping the entire health system. So it's definitely one that I could tell you the sellers have had a positive response, and it really does put a strong tile next to smarter health.
And so maybe I'll just leave it with my vision, and you can add a touch of some vision of yours. But I think, especially in this space, for me, a success in this space comes down to, we can take all of the piles of data, the piles of technology for doing machine learning and artificial intelligence and buzzword galore, and we can turn it into something that really helps people at the other end, where at the point of care, 5 years from now, there's multitude of tools that are being used that are, the equivalent of the simple alerts that they have for making sure someone with a high A1C gets their, diabetes treatment and counseling. But now it's directed at some population level to people who are going to benefit, because we're finding the folks with the rare disease, we're finding the fast progressors, and we're impacting them by translating tools across from these big data sets into each health system that's willing to adopt them. So I'm hoping we can get there, where we're still, I think, close to the starting line. Right? We've moved off.
Yeah, I think we're a little past that, because we've gone past.
We're going to get there if people come along with the journey, and have faith that we're going to cover all of those gaps as we go. But I'm not sure what you're hoping is going to be the long-term outcome. So I'd love to hear.
Well, mine is always the rapid innovation. Is what are we doing that's making a mark today, following it through the journey the way that you just described. I don't need to repeat that. That was perfect. And then also to apply different areas of the insights that we have on an analytical workbench, on some of the data exchanges that we are involved in. So I feel like we can really pull in a wide variety of our services that can really bring this together. The key is really unifying not only the forces that are out there to help us, but it's teams like you that are going to help in this collaboration, where rare diseases is one of the toughest. So if we can handle one of the toughest, then can you imagine what we can do when we get into the larger data sets, where we don't have to be as sticky with the deepness of the data and the richness of the data, but we could also analyze that and scale that. So I feel like we're definitely past the starting line, but I'm glad that you're staying humble about our approach. But I know that that's exactly where we have to start. And we are, what's really nice too is we get to focus on multiple areas of the ecosystem. So you mentioned small biotechs. It might be their first expansion. We know how to do that. We could be a part of the mid-market, which are kind of small, medium business biotechs and pharmas. And we can also help the large pharma customers and the CROs that are looking for specific sponsors that need things across the board. And this really does give us that ability to really take care of multi-market.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking, Julie. I think I'll leave it with a call to action. If anyone's interested in some of the things we're doing, we're happy to run workshops. That's one of the things that we bring as Graticule work with Watson, is that we can open up some expertise for groups that want to pursue one or more problems within their group. I think to connect with us, the easiest thing would be to go to our website, www.graticule.life, and just go to our contact form. Obviously, if you're seeing this podcast, you probably can find us already, but we're hoping you enjoyed this, and hoping that we get to hear from you sometime soon. And thanks again, Julie.
Thanks, Dan. It's been great. We expect great success, and we've already seen it. So thanks much.
All right. Bye.